Hey guys, LevelCap here, and when it comes to the competitive FPS Valorant, there's a lot to learn. Today, I'll be giving you a bunch of tips and tricks that will get you up to speed. So let's kick things off with my first tip, how to manage your recoil. And unlike many FPS games, Valorant's crosshairs do not explicitly show where your bullets are going to end up. Your shots can land above and beyond its bounds. And that's pretty counterintuitive for a modern day shooter, but there's a method to the madness. In games like Valorant, the crosshair is more of a reference point. You base how much you move the mouse to offset the recoil of your gun relative to this reference point. So my first tip is to make your crosshair static by turning off the movement and shooting error options. With a dynamic crosshair, keeping track of the center point on your screen gets harder and harder the more spread out the crosshair gets. With a static one, you'll always have a clear marker at the center of your screen. But how does recoil in Valorant actually work? Basically, your first 3 shots will land in a tight grouping, your next 3 shots will land in a looser grouping, and after that the gun sprays left to right in a somewhat randomized pattern. It's pretty easy to learn each weapon's 6-shot pattern as they're all primarily up and to the right a little bit. But once you get past that 6th shot, you're fighting against RNG recoil. This makes sustained fire spray patterns and other full auto situations much harder to control than in games like Counter-Strike Go. That game's weapons have fixed recoil patterns that persist for every shot in the magazine. Each weapon has its own recoil path. There is a slight bit of randomness that changes precisely where one path of each bullet lands, but with some practice you can get a really tight grouping even in full auto when playing Counter-Strike Go. So, because the recoil system is different in Valorant, burst firing is even more important. You really only want to fire in bursts of 6 rounds or so. As for spray transfers, meaning when you keep firing while transitioning from one target to another, it's smarter to give a brief pause while you switch targets. It's not impossible to full auto spray transfer in Valorant, but it's easier to burst fire multiple enemies. Now the next tip has to do with shooting through walls, which isn't just limited to hero abilities. Most weapons can penetrate doors, walls, and cover. Weapons like the Operator and LMG can deal pretty decent damage even through big walls, so keep that in mind when an enemy sneaks behind cover. Corners are particularly easy to shoot through, with even pistols doing moderate damage. So if you're fighting around a door or a corner, don't hesitate to try spraying through the corner instead of peeking around it. Speaking of peeking, pretty much every weapon and ability has a ready up time. So if you switch weapons or activate an ability, you have to wait a split second before you can use it. This opens you up to a quick death if you switch weapons or activate your abilities as you come out of cover. Be patient and wait for these animations to finish before trying to rush around a corner. Also, keep in mind that most abilities can be bounced off of walls or around corners. You don't always have to peek risky angles. Now, let's get into some specific tips for the heroes. Most people know Jett is the mobility hero. She can get to pretty much any spot on the maps with her jump boost. But Raze can also reach all the same places with her boost pack. The thing a lot of people don't realize about Raze's boost packs though, is that jumping and using your first one gives you plenty of time to throw out your second one and detonate it in midair. Using the boost packs like this lets you reach super high spots quickly. You can also use them as a speed boost to cross risky doors or areas. Now, everyone knows Phoenix and Viper can cast walls that damage enemies and block visibility. More often than not, these are used to block enemies off or prevent them from pushing as quickly. However, something not a lot of players know is that you can use these walls in some clever ways. Flicking your mouse left or right when casting Phoenix's wall bends it in that direction. So if you're trying to block off multiple entrances to a site, you can curve the wall instead of having it line up directly. Phoenix can also defuse the bomb while using his ult. Use this to get a partial defuse and then finish it when your ult ends, or let a teammate take care of the rest. Viper's wall can be shot over stuff in an incredibly long line that will block off entire sites and their entryways. The mini-map shows how far Viper's wall will go in a given direction, so use it to line up some insanely long walls. Now, when it comes to OP abilities, there's plenty I could talk about, but Omen's teleport is bonkers. You can use him in a strat called teleplanting. Basically, you wait for the enemy team to commit to one bomb site and then have Omen teleport to the other one. He can plant the bomb without the enemy team realizing it, forcing them to retake the site as your teammates file in to help hold it. If Omen has his ult, it's almost a guaranteed plant and you can use it to win a round or earn some extra money. Now, my final hero tip is to always have someone play Sage on your team. The ability to heal teammates and also resurrect them is a game-changing ability that you'd be crazy not to take advantage of. Sage can negate the impact of a teammate dying or taking heavy damage. Without her, your team is at a huge disadvantage, even against the team that also isn't running Sage. Now, the next tip I have is specific to the bind map, but is still incredibly useful. The teleporters on these maps will suck in anything that crosses their activation plane, not just players. So if you want to trick the enemy team into thinking that you've used one, throw an ability or your pistol through the teleporter. It makes the same sound as if you went through it yourself and can really mess with the enemy team. Now, I want to circle back around to shooting mechanics. All guns are basically as accurate from the hip as they are when ADSing. The key difference is that ADSing reduces the recoil a bit. That said, I'd recommend against using ADS on basically every gun except the operator, which is the only gun in the game that has inaccurate hipfire. And there's a number of reasons why I would recommend against using ADS on most weapons. The biggest one is that while you're ADSing, it slows your movement speed. Also, you won't automatically un-aim down sights if you're holding the fire button. And finally, ADSing really only gives you a mild zoom. Beyond that, hipfiring is faster, just as accurate, and doesn't add any additional complexity to a gunfight. Now, you might have noticed that I said the only gun that isn't accurate from the hip is the one-hit kill sniper rifle, the operator. The other sniper rifle, the Marshall, is almost 100% accurate from the hip. It also has very minimal recoil. Obviously, using the scope makes getting those critical headshots much easier, but as long as you're not moving, the Marshall can be used from the hip to take out targets at basically any range. Now, the classic pistol's burst fire is also pretty deadly. It shoots 3 rounds at once and can down an enemy with no armor instantly. That said, if you want to sneak a little extra damage, firing a single shot then quickly right-clicking essentially gives you a 4-shot burst that will also kill an enemy with partial shields, assuming that you land a headshot. Now, in situations where money is low and you need to win rounds against enemies flush with cash, you should probably consider buying LMGs over SMGs or pistols. The Ares in particular does some insane damage, has a 50-round magazine, and is also very accurate. Picking it over the Spectre is probably a no-brainer in dire situations. It's only $100 more, but it deals more damage and can take out multiple enemies with ease. The major drawback is the reduced movement speed LMGs give you. That said, the slowdown is on par with the assault rifles, so it's not like you're at a massive disadvantage in later rounds. In the first few rounds of a half, it's smarter to go with the SMGs because everyone's likely using them and has low armor. But later on, especially in eco rounds, LMGs can be a deciding factor in the outcome of a round. My final tip for this video is to check out the blizz.gg site for Valorant. It's got all the info you need to learn about map callouts, weapon stats, and more. I'll leave a link in the video description for it. And that's all the tips I have for you on this video. This should be a good place to start when building up your skill set for Valorant. If you guys want more advice or you would like me to cover Valorant more in the future, let me know in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is LevelCap signing off.
Another one on site, lit 27.
Okay, got it.
Is ready.
Rezzing. One on the left.
Spike planted.
One on the left.
One enemy remaining.
Very back.
Find the wall. GG, boys!